welcome back to the Movie Marketing and Distribution Podcast, powered by Usher U. My name is Alex Stoltz, and as well as hosting this show, I'm head of film at Usher U, which is spelled USHERU, and I run a company called Future of Film. At Usher U, we are dedicated to innovating film marketing and distribution. And you can find out more about what we do and access all of the other podcasts in this series at usheru.com. So, as I mentioned, we're dedicated to innovating film marketing and distribution, and I think that can also be said of my guest today, Sarah Mosses. Sarah is the founder and CEO of Together Films, a marketing, distribution and technology company serving the international film community from its offices in London and NYC. Sarah has previously acted as the head of marketing for leading film festivals, including Sheffield Doc Fest, Doc NYC, Human Rights Watch Film Festival, and the Athena Film Festival. She also helps a variety of industry and brand clients to optimize their business performance through technology and operational support, something I know we could all benefit from. And clients there include Sony and Patagonia. Sarah recently graduated from a prestigious Inside Pictures film leadership course. It's an amazing program. And she was also selected for the Mayor of London's International Growth Programme, including trade visits to NYC and LA. Sarah, it's such a pleasure to see you here this morning. Thank you for joining the show.
Absolute pleasure. Yeah, I'm so excited to be here, and I love hearing your other guests. So I'm pleased to be one of them.
Oh, well, it's overdue. So delighted to be having this time to catch up, because I feel like I'm always seeing something in the trade press about Together Films, new initiatives, expanding new partnerships, and so I'm excited to hear about what's been happening. Tell me where things are, the status of the business with Together and how it started, and where are things?
Sure thing. So maybe let's start with the origin story of Together, and then we'll sort of build up from there. So I previously worked for a great organisation called Doc Society, and based on current news, I just want to give a shout out of love to the fearless founder, Jess Search, who recently passed away. And she was an amazing mentor, and I learned most of what I know now. I learned from being in that team in my formation years. So Together started when I left DocSoc. And I originally was just consulting one-on-one with projects that were trying to make impact in the world. So one of my roles at Doc Society was supporting the Good Pitch program and doing some kind of what we call distribution sort of experiments with some of the slate that we had funded organisation. And some have gone very, very well. And so when I left the fund, people wanted to know, okay, what is impact and how can I have an impactful release, and how do I tie together distribution, impact, marketing, all these different things together in a holistic fashion. And so it was very much kind of me kind of supporting a whole range of filmmakers. And then after a while, it was, okay, that's a really amazing bit of advice, but like, can you now do all that work? And I was like, sure, we'll get a team. So it was very organic. It was never sort of on day one, I'm going to launch a business that operates globally. It was day one, I want to help one person. And then that person recommended to another person, and it grew very organically. And when we entered lockdown, we were about 6 full-time staff. We were doing some UK distribution. So we had Unrest, which is a film from Sundance. We brought out in the UK, and that included a touring VR program. We had Roll Red Roll that we launched in the US in US theatres. And that was really challenging this idea of high school sexual assault. So we were doing what we call distribution experiments. We wouldn't ever call ourselves a full-time distributor, because each release was trying to do something slightly different in terms of marketing distribution. And then obviously lockdown happened and the world changed forever. And what was interesting is we had a film that was booked to open in New York cinemas that weekend, and it obviously got announced cinemas were closing, and there was a big concern over what would we all do as an industry. And me being me, as my team will say, the self-professed geek of the team, I'm a systems person, I'm a digital person. I built like a virtual cinema system literally in like 24 hours. I stayed up all night being like, okay, if this cinema is not opening tomorrow, but we've already marketed this to like lots of people and there's Q&As that have been booked, how could we flip that around? And we had Q&As. We managed to kind of flip it into a 14-day schedule of virtual Q&As, including hosts like Roxane Gay, and then have this like virtual cinema system, which was a horrible smash together of like bits of Squarespace, Vimeo. It was like all the tools that no one knew what they were doing with yet, but it was built in 24 hours. And we made that first weekend's like deadline article of like virtual cinema is like happening in some way. And it was us and like, I think it was Trolls, and it was one of the film mentioned. And we're like, okay, we're doing something here that's interesting. And from that, I launched a webinar, a one-off webinar that turned into a webinar series over 9 months during that lockdown first year, where we were teaching most of the industry, like the tips and sort of tricks of how to do this sort of virtual digital engagement. So at peak time, we would have 2,000 listeners tuning in every week. It sort of became like a thing for me, like just keep going every Monday and like help one more person try and translate this digital situation when we're all stuck at home. So we had multiple film festivals were helping transition. We had filmmakers who'd been planning for ages to have a cinema release, and it was just got cancelled because of the trouble, but still then making 50, 60, 70K in like one weekend through digital sales, which for that particular film size of the things we were advising on was an amazing win. So we managed to sort of establish this understanding within many industry colleagues of being a sort of go-to sort of virtual digital operational support function, and all from a place of just, we have knowledge we want to share. And the webinar was completely free. There was no paid access. It was all like, let's help people that we can. But now seeing an amazing amount of organizations that were able to transform through that process, to a point where when I was at TIFF last year, I was in the queue. We had a film called In Her Hands that was playing, that we're working on the impact campaign for, and a woman just ran up and hugged me and was like, oh my God, you're Sarah. And I was like, hi, who are you? And she's like, I listened to your webinar. I was like there with you live every week for 9 months. And I'm on the board of multiple film festivals. And like everything you said, I did. And we managed to get through and we didn't go bankrupt. And like it happened. And it's literally because I listened to you every week. I was like, that is amazing. Because that was then like 2 years after the fact. It was really surreal. So what started off as literally me sat in my kind of lounge doing this, really from everything we've heard from partners we work with, just really inspired everybody to sort of go in the right direction, which I was really kind of thrilled to hear. So coming out of lockdown, weirdly, we were one of the kind of companies that grew during that time, rather than contracting. And then one of our kind of day-to-day missions of what we did a lot of was this non-theatrical screening kind of tours for a lot of impact films. A lot of filmmakers want to work with Greenpeace, Human Rights Watch, sort of all these NGOs and organizations. And so one of the biggest pivots we had was virtual versions of those screenings. And I hosted a Q&A or managed a Q&A every other day for nearly one full year on a virtual platform. It was an insane amount of Q&As during that time. But it really showed that model was a good, sustainable, potentially lucrative revenue stream for filmmakers that other people hadn't yet tapped into at that time in the market, which was really beneficial. So that sort of brought us out of lockdown with a whole new lot of skill sets, a larger team, and then most recently expanding into international sales, which we can cover more sort of as we go through this conversation. So it's been a really interesting evolution from starting with no formal business plan to now having a team of 14 people across 2 different countries, but serving filmmakers on an international basis, built on this very clear understanding of like data, digital, operational organization. It allows us to operate at sort of a certain scale, from what is actually in reality quite a small team doing all that stuff.
Wow, well done for getting through those Q&As. That's a tall order to bring the energy on a daily basis like that. But that's amazing. What's the, I get the operation, the digital efficiency side of it, which is so important, and so and so many companies, clearly are benefiting from that, learning from you. But also, what's the DNA, would you say, of Together Films? What's your overarching mission?
Yeah. So say we are obsessed with films that can make an impact in the world. So all the things that we do day to day, we could apply to any type of media. It could be a horror film, it could be a kind of a genre film. The same tactics will apply, but we are obsessed about using those tactics for films that can make a positive contribution in the world. And I just think it's like from a point of view of, It's really hard to release any film. It's really hard to get bums on seats, like for any film, except maybe Barbie, like that marketing team are geniuses. But if you're going to do it, for me personally, I'm like, let's do it on a project that is hopefully going to contribute something beneficial to society. So some of the films, they're really overtly kind of a campaign film, or a film that is about maybe an activist, and other films are quite subtle. It's a film that may be about identity politics, and one particular scene is pushing that button. It doesn't have to be sort of grassroots leaders shouting and protests throughout the whole narrative. And it also, from that, then our sort of network of collaborators and partners are quite specific outside of the general sort of film marketing landscape. So our database of sort of NGOs, charity partners, educators is like in the thousands. And we sort of have them all tagged by issue context. We can mobilize a group of passionate individuals in most of the major cities across the US and the UK, based on the issue thematics that film is about. So when it's a climate change film, when it's a human rights film, like we have that collection of humans that can mobilize quite quickly. And we also know how to engage them in a way that feels less transactional and much more supportive and collaborative. So if you're just saying to them like, hey, share the trailer, they're like, why? We're busy. But we can give them a little bit more support. And it comes back to how we encourage the audience to take action after they've seen this kind of film. So we prepare our filmmakers for whether it's a donation drive or a volunteer drive, or just finding out more information for your organization. There's a way to follow on and take action post viewing, which means we can build these more holistic relationships with these organizations.
I know we were chatting earlier before we started. You work, you know Christy Marchese very well from Kinema. It sounds like there's but we did a previous episode talking to Christy about how Kinema works and works with sort of organizations like that. So obviously she talks about megaphones, I think, in that finding the megaphone, as in finding those groups which can then, or influential people who can then share the message. Is that something which you also resonate with?
Yeah, absolutely. And Christy is like a very good friend, and also was like one of my sort of like earlier mentors. I really looked to her business that she originally founded, Picture Motion, as a really amazing sort of example of this kind of business that could work in this manner. And we actually now use Kinema as our platform to manage some of our screenings, just because what she's built is really fantastic. So yeah, this kind of megaphone idea is really important. Finding those ambassadors, finding those individuals that can share a message about a film in a really powerful way is like the crux of our work to kind of make these films thrive. And an example we have is also, when you can build a community around a film, it's again moving away this transactional basis. We had a film called 2040, which is about solutions to the climate crisis. It's an amazing Australian documentary, one of the top 10 highest grossing docs in Australia, by an Australian director called Damon Gamo. And there was a Facebook group that was started by essentially like fans of this film. And that's quite a basic thing. Everybody has Facebook groups. That's not world changing. But this group now has over 80,000 members, and they self-serve each other, where someone will be like, how do we solve this crisis? And someone says, oh, here's a resource, let's get involved. And just from that one Facebook group, we receive about 1 to 2 screening requests every single week. We've not marketed that film for over 3 years, and yet we convert 1 to 2 paid screenings every single week from that community. And so what this really shows is when you have an impactful story, an impactful theme, and you can build true community around this. And I really credit as well the producer, Anna Kaplan, who's amazing, who's based in Australia, because she is sort of like the queen of this dialogue in the Australian context. The building of that community between all the different distributors, sort of encouraging people to kind of be involved there. It also gets you like sustained income over a very long-term basis. Like we've spent zero marketing dollars for over 3 years, and yet still get paid screening licenses every week coming in from a community that is obsessed. And the referral context around that, every time someone says, hey, my friend who runs this organization said I should book this film, can I get some information? It's referral on like speed, kind of going around the world, which is amazing. So this idea of everyone's obsession with the opening weekend box office, which is so important in our industry. But for these types of impactful films, we're seeing leverage, revenue, interest, support for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years post-release, without having to consistently drive that marketing. If you've built the support of community ambassadorship within the marketing plan from the first day, it will essentially market itself for many, many years. So that's the ideology that we try to create with all of our projects now, is where is the actual crux of community? Where are they speaking? Where are they in dialogue? Hosting things like webinars, like after a film's been released, hosting webinars where passionate audience members can come together and hear about what's happening and the follow-on impact of the film, so they can then keep referring it to their other partners. It's a really powerful mentality when you see it in action. Like, you're no longer spending marketing, not even dollars, but even time, and yet you're still getting constant kind of inbound revenue generation from those sources.
But it's got to be authentic, right? It's got to be meaningful. It's got to really tie in with the, genuinely tie in with the movie. Not something you can fake, is it?
Exactly. And some people, when they come to us and they say, like, hey, I want to launch a massive impact campaign, like, I see that's a way we can get marketing. And then I look at the film and I look at what they're suggesting and I'm like, I don't feel like this is a fit for you. Like, I feel like doing a really cool marketing campaign makes sense, but what we, myself and Christy and the people in this world would call kind of impact or impact marketing, doesn't quite fit that particular project. I'd rather just say to that film team, hey guys, just do a traditional run. Like, that makes more sense for you.
Yeah. What going back to the sort of that lockdown moment and that explosion of virtual cinema, where do you see virtual cinema today? Is it still a viable model? And are you really now just driving people back to the physical space?
Yeah, it's a really interesting kind of global moment that happened. Like, it's like no cinemas at all, so everyone goes online. Then some countries around the world, cinemas opened and they closed again, and they opened again. There was this really weird like fluctuation in sort of like market availability for these titles during those sort of 2.5 years. As we're now back to full sort of cinema openings and we see the amazingness of what Barbie did the last few weeks and people really wanted to come out, there's a real benefit to sort of driving audiences back to in person. However, something that we're really conscious of during lockdown was the virtual theatre kind of availability actually provided increased access to certain audiences who couldn't get to those theatres. So as an example, with Human Rights Watch Film Festival that we manage in New York, they're usually operating out of 2 physical spaces, Film Lincoln Center and the IFC Cinema. And so if you're in Manhattan, if you're in Brooklyn, you can go. But the rest of the country never had access to that programming, to those films. And some of those films, as we know, are quite difficult to pick up for distribution. So if you've got like a really hard-hitting human rights doc, it may never see anything outside festivals. So when we launched the virtual version of that festival, we had viewers in all kind of 50 states in the first edition. And now there's a continuation of having that virtual access, because there are some people who just will never be able to go to a space that is showing that type of film. And especially when we look at the US market, so many of what I would call the impactful titles, documentaries or fiction, they're opening on limited releases. They're opening in maybe 15, 20, if you're lucky, 50 markets. So there's so many people across the country that never have access to that in a physical form. And so having the virtual availability is really good for that access. The other element is also around just what in any other language we would call affiliate marketing. So in every other business sector, you would have this notion of affiliate marketing. You have an influencer on TikTok. Hey, here's this amazing t-shirt. If you buy it through my link, I make 1 pence, you make kind of £1. The idea of affiliate marketing is so standardized in every other business sector. And in the film industry, we've never really called it that, but effectively that's what virtual theatre is. It's an affiliate saying, I vouch for this film is amazing, you should buy it here. And when you think about that endorsement basis, I still see a value in that, even if the numbers have gone back to sort of, okay, the majority of income is now coming from physical, less from virtual, but you can still get it from virtual. So the way we approach it now is saying, if we can have the uplift for sort of signing up to be super easy. So, hey, partner, here's a link dedicated to you. Anything you sell, you make a fraction of that cost. The setup is so small, but the potential value on a long-term basis is really big. They can keep pushing out that link for like 2 years. Incrementally, they gain value, we gain value. And it's no pressure to us. We're not shipping a DCP. We're not doing physical posters. There's very limited actual costs in setting that up. And so we now think of it, and we just really call it now, it's affiliate marketing as part of our plan. And it means that we're really aware of that's what it is. It's an affiliate way of marketing a product that ultimately increases your revenue base through those different partner stakeholders.
Yeah, I really like that, and I hadn't quite put it into those words before, but yeah, it makes complete sense, and I think that's a very helpful way to represent it to cinemas as a like this is about, revenue opportunity for you, and it's and just serving a wider audience base as well.
Yeah,
I love it. Tell me about international sales and what was the the opportunity you saw in that space, and what are your ambitions there?
Yeah, so we worked since we sort of started the business with so many amazing sales agents who I love and adore, and I think they're brilliant. So we work frequently with people like Roco Films, Outlook Film Sales, had for Sama, Cinephil. Like, there's so many incredible agents that we adore, and we still want to work with them in that way. So when we're working on impact film, it may already have an agent, and we're working really kind of side by side with those partners. So that will still continue in a really great way. But what we were seeing from a wider marketplace view was impact films need so much care and attention to kind of do all the different avenues that we sort of have in our operation. So whether it is planning events with people like the UN, whether it is doing a mass mobilization of 1,000 screenings of grassroots hosts, like there's a lot of thinking, planning, effort that goes into that. And when we were doing that work, we would then see like, okay, because of the kind of mass mobilization around the impact side, some of our films are then going on afterwards to land bigger sort of distribution sort of offerings. So we would have, I won't name names in this context to protect the kind of filmmakers and confidentiality, but there'll be a project we work on and maybe they hadn't yet got a PBS deal or a Netflix deal or a Hulu deal or an Amazon deal, whatever the big buyer's name would be. And that was a frustration for the team. And we're like, okay, well, let's like go forward with what we are able to manage ourselves and deliver in our own way. We can make sure we plan a really fantastic festival opening. We can make sure we cultivate a theatrical moment, like our team can book both UK and US, like we can kind of that happen. Let's build a movement around a project that could then maybe uplift it to a kind of next party buyer. And so we did this many times, and there were many deals that then happened, but there was always someone else being the agent. And that was in that time, we were like, that's fine. Like, you're winning. I'm really happy for you. I'm proud of you as my client. That's fantastic. But after about the 15th time that happened, we were like, okay, someone else is doing that deal, which is great. That's their job. But they're taking that commission of what by the end of like a 7-month process for them was really then just sending like a few emails to the right buyers saying, hey, look how this film has now grown. It has bigger presence. It has bigger audience appeal. Now this is ready for you to make that big offer. And so we just ran the numbers and we looked at sort of literally how many millions have been made in those deals over the last few years. And we're like, we want to be in that sector. That just makes sense for us now. If we're building that momentum, if we're building that brand around that project, we should be able to go and close those deals as it went through. And we also wanted to be that trusted partner for films of impact. So rather than being sort of the film on the slate, which is sort of like, oh God, that's going to be a lot of effort. That one, we've got this film led by this amazing key cast, like that will sell easily. We wanted all of our films in a way to be those ones that take a lot of work. Like, we want the whole slate to be impactful, the whole slate to kind of challenge the things that are happening in the world right now, and building these big campaigns around each one of them. And when we're speaking with our producers, not everybody wants like a global impact campaign with 5,000 screenings in the UN. That's fine. They're just like, make sure I get distribution and let's do a couple of Q&As. And that's okay, because those stories are still coming out to the world. But for those producers who do want all those bells and whistles, we can do it in a really holistic fashion between the two. And we went to the BFI and applied for their Global Screen Fund. And amazingly, we're so thankful to them. We secured a 3-year business development grant to kind of expand this area and higher up in this department. And when we were kind of talking with them about sort of what would our slate look like, and we're like, every film will be impactful. And it's like, okay, are there enough films like that are brilliant? I'm like, absolutely, there's so many of them. But a lot of the times, maybe you don't hear of them because we haven't had the ability to do that mass mobilization around these titles if the agent isn't understanding of how that can kind of function. And the few unique aspects that we're sort of bringing into this lens is each of our producers has a real-time data dashboard. I'm a geek. I love this information. It's really important. But we're also working on a really transparent basis. If I know something, you should know something. So they all have a real-time dashboard, which is, okay, here are all the pitches out in different countries. Here are the sort of status of the kind of flow of screener availability, who's made an offer, what the offer is, a real-time dashboard and then of what the kind of revenue is in that particular market. And that goes across both traditional sales, so all rights kind of sales across the world. Maybe it's just broadcast sales, festival mapping, and non-theatrical. So effectively, if we know something, you know something. Because previously, before I set up together, I also produced some films, and I was so frustrated that I'd get a report like once every 6 months. That really annoyed me. And I'm like, but I know a lot of these buyers as well personally. So like if I see them in a bar, I don't know if you've pitched them. Have they said no? Have they said yes? Is it in contract? Where's it at? Because there isn't that like real-time dialogue. And so it was really important for us that a kind of key differentiation for us was having this real-time data dashboard where if we know the information, you know the information. And then we obviously send the traditional royalty report. Here's your actual statement of expenses and income as a sort of piece of accounting. But the actual process of who is currently reviewing should be transparent. And that was really important to us. And the second layer of kind of difference that we're looking at is our ability to access sort of non-traditional film financing partners. So at the moment, this comes both into production and kind of impact campaign planning for some of our projects. But when we're looking at P&A spend, when we're looking at sort of how we can cover the costs of a release, we received last year a 3-year grant of $500,000 to focus on climate change projects coming out into the world. So effectively in film language, it's a contribution towards P&A specifically for climate titles. To a foundation, it is growing a movement around climate change, but we can use different language for the same line items of expenses. And so what we're aiming to do, and we have a head of fundraising in our team, Lindsay, is expand on that foundation funding landscape to actually kind of buffer some of the expenses so that in some cases, our hope in the future is there'll be zero expenses to a producer because a foundation has said this film coming out around the world could change the face of this issue and we would happily support some of those costs around that. And so that may not happen in every single case. Maybe we're not going to all of our films, but some of our projects, we're hoping that kind of comes in. And with this climate change pot we have at the moment, we're able to essentially self-select the films that we think would be appropriate for that. So this particular funder, they're focused on climate change policy. So we've been working recently on a film called To the End that was released. It was at Sundance last year and released in the US in December. So we're able to look at a project and say, okay, it fits within that kind of bucket of funding that we have. We can essentially say, we will come and do this work. We can cover the costs. We can make this happen. And that also happened. We were working really closely with Met Film Sales, who had the rights for Fashion Reimagined, a really wonderful film that premiered at Tribeca last year. So we were able to use that pot to do a screening with the European Parliament. And actually following that screening, they changed and they sort of signed up to a huge movement to change the fashion supply industry as it came through. So we're bringing these kind of two elements that for me seem really obvious. Like you should have full transparency of like where you're at in a sales process across the board. But it really surprised me. We did a huge market assessment of how people operate. And it really surprised me that that wasn't like standard. And then bringing this non-traditional grant funding, foundation funding into this mix that usually is only reserved for maybe documentary production is very likely used in the fiction scape because of the way in which financing plans operate, but actually can be really amazingly a brilliant pot of funding to bring into this world, especially when you can inform that funder of the way in which they're involved. So it's not about them telling the filmmakers what to do, affecting the actual film structure. Like it's none of that. It's the film is already there. We want you to help it come out in the world in the best way possible. I say that's the sort of plan. And we have to really stress test it with the BFI, which was a really good process of sort of going through their application flow to check all those assumptions, to really do a market assessment and really land on the notion that actually those are our two unique signifiers to the market of what we're doing. And we're really excited about that. So our first two titles in camera premiered at Carla Vivari in the summer, which is a feature funded by the BFI and BBC Films by Nakash Khalid, produced by Mary Burke and Juliet Lath. Mary was previously at Warp for a long time in BFI. And then Tish, which was the opening film of Sheffield Docfest. And we're about to announce a series of whole other festivals for those titles. We've already got sales in multiple countries for some of those titles. So it's got like we're literally kind of opened the doors officially a few months ago, and also thanks to Vicky Brown, who came in. She's now gone on to a new job at the BFI in their distribution team, but she helped in sort of the formation months to sort of get that all started. But it's exciting. It's a lot of work. We're very grateful to BFI for contributing funding towards that. And we're really excited already about the feedback we're getting from producers and from buyers, because that's a real positive in terms of what we've been seeing the last few months.
Wow, there's a lot there, and it's really that's really exciting. You've got sort of challenging quite a few different traditional assumptions, I think, about that space. I'm really interested about that first piece you mentioned, where you're creating that buzz. I don't know if buzz is the right word, but creating that profile for the film through a screening program, through that kind of activity. Does that mean then that is that always going to be part of a strategy whereby you say, okay, we're almost like taking theatrical rights to a particular territory, and then you smash it, and then it's like, okay, look what we've built here. There's opportunity, on other platforms.
Yeah, so we're definitely taking every film like case by case. So there's a project we're speaking with at the moment, which we think has like very traditional global theatrical potential. And so if we take that out to market and a theatrical buyer in certain territories says, hey, like, we love this is cast led, this is a fiction project, and we think this could deliver well at box office. If those offers come in immediately, we will absolutely sign those rights, sign those deals. Like, that is the best path for that film. But if for any reason the market doesn't react in that way as we think it would, we would then say, okay, what can we cultivate in especially the UK and the US, which obviously dominates the discussion, and saying, what could we do directly as direct kind of distribution through us to build that buzz, build that kind of leverage, and then go back up to a major kind of streaming partner or broadcast partner. And we've seen this time and time again in our documentary work, where that is just a tried and tested method that we now know sort of works, where it doesn't even have to have a box office smash hit, but as long as it generated a respectable amount of box office, should we say, a respectable amount of box office, but also leverage increased press awareness, sort of marketing, sort of love from our community and constituents, we can leverage that to go back to a platform buyer or a broadcast buyer and say, hey, look what we did here. This is why you should buy into this, and kind of give us a bigger sale. And also translate that to sales in other territories around the world, where we can show evidence of this is working. So the way that we're kind of working with producers at the moment is saying, we will try and go and get you the best distributor in every country that makes sense for this film. And for most of you, our whole slate is visually to be theatrical first. And if that doesn't happen for any reason, we can then architect that moment to try and then bring in the interest of a larger buyer. So it's this idea of like, it doesn't have to be all about us. Like, we're not saying that we have to release every film, but we have to own it. If there's a better partner and there's a partner that's bringing amazing energy, a huge P&A, the respect and kind of reputation of a larger buyer in that territory, of course we'll work with them, and we're excited to work with them. But if those offers don't come in, we're not going to sit idly by and be like, oh, sorry, that film didn't work, on to the next one. It's like the idea is to have a slate that is manageable in size. 10 to 12 films a year-ish is what we're looking at the moment, where if for any reason those offers don't come in, we can self-orchestrate something in those key territories.
Really exciting. Going back to your passion for operational efficiency through digital tools and processes, can you, Sarah, give a from your work with different film organisations, festivals, and so on? Where do you see the biggest blind spot, I suppose, for organisations in that space, or the quickest win? I suppose something. I'm fishing for a tip or some advice, I suppose, for film organisations. How can they sort of make gains in their operational efficiency?
Yeah, I love this. I could talk about this for days. So as I said, I'm the biggest geek in my team. If you work with us, you have to be a geek, but you have to be geek excited to like want to use systems. because it just means we can operate at such a bigger scale. So when I talk about the output of the organization and someone's like, oh, how many people have you got? And I'm like, oh, about 13, 14 people. And they're like, oh, we thought you'd have like a team of like 40, because we do a lot for the small number of people that we are in reality. And that's because we have efficient systems, and it is just the way things can work. So the two areas I see most important for most of the clients we work with is project management and CRM. So let's go to break those two things down into like a real clear way. So
I'm making notes.
Yeah, everyone get a pen and paper out. I'm making this one. So project management is just so crucial, like so crucial. So we have implemented, I would say in 100% of the film festivals we worked at, we've implemented a new project management system, including Sheffield Doc Fest, Doc NYC. Like, you just have to have, and it's not to say these people didn't have any systems. I love all my clients, and they've had systems in the past, but we sort of come in and be like, here is a more optimized system that you could be using for project management. So tracking of key deadlines, deliverables, milestones, task tracking. Like, I can look in our system any day and see absolutely everything my entire team is working on. And I can go in there and say, hey guys, I can see a bottleneck coming up in 3 weeks. How about we move that around now so we're not worried in 3 weeks' time? Like, we can forecast out so cleanly because we have a system that sort of can spot those things in real time. So the system that we use now, we've been through a lot of different variations, like Asana and Monday.com. We now use a system called ClickUp for our internal project management. It's the one that I found the most sort of has just the right balance of customization that is really powerful for us. And I can see the increased output of my team when everybody is like ClickUp focused, everything's in there, it's working in a brilliant way. And JP, for example, our head of digital, he runs all of our film festival marketing accounts. He'll bring it up in every single meeting with the client. Hey, here are the upcoming deadlines. Here's our timeline. Like, what are we doing? And it sounds so obvious that you should have a tracker that everybody can see. But my God, the amount of organizations we go into, and there's just either nothing, or what I normally get presented with is a Google spreadsheet that is not organized. And it's not even got like column headings. It's not got efficient notes. Like, there's some attempt at organization, which I always like. I'm like, well done, you started step one. But when I interrogate it and say, great, well, when's this, is this going to conflict with this milestone? Oh, I don't know. Right, okay, well then you need to know that, you need to understand it. So principal first point, if you're starting this from scratch, you're like, how could I start? Is look at a really efficient project management system. Every single person in your team has to use it. This is another really important point. We have things where it's like, oh, the CEO won't work, we use it, or no, marketing uses a different system. You have to have your entire business operating in the same system so that you can see all the independent milestones, deadlines, areas that are important. So that's like the first one. Second one is CRM. So CRM, customer relationship management tools. So the basics of this will be something like a MailChimp system. So most people have a newsletter, they have a list of humans. But if I said to them, how many of these humans are in America? How many of these humans have the job title booker? How many of these humans are interested in climate change? If you go into the deep of the data, most organizations do not have that level of like segmentation, and they only have it stored in a system, which is newsletter. So what we have a custom CRM, which helps us plan this data dashboard I talked about before, where we can look up an account, we can look up Greenpeace, we can look up, here are the 43 different people that we know at the organization. I can see every single email sent to that person, both one-on-one from my Gmail account and from our newsletter system. I can make a deal for that person. Hey, we want to have like 14 screenings with them next month. Let's make that as a deal. So it's the interactions and activities around a person, an organization, tagged by what is most important to your organization. So we have our data set is in the multiple six-figure thousands, and it's tagged by issue context, it's tagged by job title, like location. So if we get a screening booked for New York, within like 2 minutes, my team can be like, here's a list of 1,200 people within a half an hour of the film forum in New York that are passionate about women's rights and refugee rights, and we have the email addresses for all of them. It's like, it's just efficient, it's there, it's ready to go. And whether your organizational's data set is 20 people, 200 people, 200,000 people, you have to have it organized. And there was a really interesting example of this, and I'm sure they won't mind me saying this, but Doc NYC, one of my favorite clients, I love them dearly, they had something like 87 Google spreadsheets that they had all this stored in. So if you're like, hey, who do we know here? someone would have to sort of search an entire drive, search lots of different sheets, trying to find who we knew. And I was like, I'm just going to make you an Airtable and put it all together. So it was like a summer project a few years ago. Airtable is another tool that we use very frequently. And we combined like all of that data into one resource so they could look up who screened a film in 2015, who's also been on an industry panel, who's also in our marketing list. And you could just look up that human and be like, oh, they do all those different things. You can see the interconnection within your organization. So this is crucial for film festival planning like that, like who's been on a panel versus who's a producer that we're screening their film on. And then also crucial for anyone running just proficient marketing campaigns. Again, this applies to like horror films, genre films, like any kind of issue that you're working on. We obsess with social issue films, but this level of planning should be part of your organization, whatever type you are. So the two things I encourage every listener to do is have a proficient project management system and have a CRM where you fully understand who is in your network and who is it that you are engaged with. And if you're no longer engaged with them, how might you get them back into engagement as it comes through? So those two. And then for me, data visualization across all of this is just helpful as a tool. So for all of our projects, there'll be graphs, there'll be charts, there'll be maps, or geocode everything. We made a beautiful map for Human Rights Watch of the IP address of every single viewer of the entire festival. And we could see the hotspots of where there was engagement. That gives a really simple plan for the following years. Hey, we didn't have that many people in Arkansas. Let's get more viewers there. We can really visualize something to then act upon it as we go through. And the importance being you're reviewing in real time. You're not waiting to the end of a project. Because if you wait to the end of a project, you've got no ability to pivot and change your strategy. So looking at that data in real time is the most beneficial way that you can plot those things out.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, all makes complete sense, and lots of similarities, I think, to what we do at Usher U, and lots of notes I'm taking for future films.
Yeah.
So that's really, really inspiring, Sarah. Thank you for sharing that. It's really great advice. Well, it's been fascinating. We're coming to the end of our time. I just love to wrap up. Really, I suppose what's exciting you for the future of Together Films, the future of film going?
Yeah, so in our current sort of future planning, we're doing a lot of work with potential new brand funded clients. So there's a whole webinar just on this project that you could do. But one of our previous clients is Patagonia. We've worked on 3 different film releases with them. They're an amazing, amazing organization who truly have an authentic sort of obsession with the issues of the climate environment. So we've worked on 3 environmental films with them. And when everyone's debating this idea of where could the money come from, who are the new film financiers, we have a number of clients now in the kind of brand space who are funding either entirely a feature film or co-financing with other partners. And for me, like, it's a really exciting new phase, not even a new phase. People like Brian Newman, who I adore, has been in space for a long time. But they are new people standing there saying, hey, we have a lot of money and we want to be involved. We want to get engaged. And I think if that process can be kind of connected, thought through in the most clever and sensible and authentic manner, it can deem amazing results. So there are brands that come to us and I say, absolutely not working with you, not going to happen. And there are others where we're like, I understand your mission and I understand this is aligned and I can see how film could be really great to your strategy. So we have a fantastic new project launching later this year with a huge kind of partner in the US. And that will be a 2-year long campaign. Like, they're also investing on the long term. They're not just investing on like, if the box office opening weekend doesn't work, then we pull out. It's like they understand, because they understand how marketing takes time to build leverage and build kind of power, because that's how brands work. They're investing on a long-term basis. So that for us has been a really interesting sort of new expansion, and will also increase our like team numbers kind of in the US, which is really exciting. And then what else is coming up at the moment? That's really exciting. And I think kind of our more focus like into the kind of fiction space and scripted space. So because I work for a documentary funder, most of our clients since I left have all been docs, because that was my network, that was who I knew, but it was never supposed to be exclusively that. We just had a lot of people in the documentary space. But since working within Camera, which is our first sort of title on the sales slate, it was really important that we opened it with a scripted title, because it was like, we're excited about how more scripted projects could be in this space of impact and deliver amazing work. So I looked at places like Eva Devani's Array kind of label and Participant and those types of companies, and seeing there's amazing examples of really powerful, impactful titles. And that's the kind of film that we want to be signing sort of moving forward. So the scripts that we're looking at the moment, the sort of the writers and script writers and directors we're speaking to, that is making me really excited, because I'm seeing how we can kind of expand that further in a scripted space. So some of them are very early, they're in sort of development at the moment, but we're hoping to announce a few of those new titles in probably Q1 2024.
Amazing. All very exciting. And congratulations on what you've built so far, and I'm looking forward to the next announcement I come across in the trades, no doubt. Sarah, thank you so much for joining the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to listening to future episodes.
You've been listening to the Movie Marketing and Distribution podcast, powered by UsherU. If you want to know more about how UsherU can transform your marketing and distribution, just head over to usheru.com, or why not drop me an email at alex@usheru.com. But in the meantime, thank you again for listening, and look forward to welcoming you back on the podcast very soon.